lately I feel like there's been a huge debate in, why old cars are a lot better to buy than newer cars. And don't get me wrong, I love old cars, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite in this video because, I've not been the kindest towards new cars lately. However, I don't think it's as simple as everyone thinks it is. I don't think older cars are actually as good as people say they are. I don't know, maybe older cars get glazed a little bit too much. But for argument's sake, when I'm referring to newer cars, I'm going to say maybe, let's say the 2010 to 2025, and then older cars, the mid-80s to the early 2000s. Look, first of all, let's start off with the looks. Older cars just look better. In my opinion, they look a lot better than newer cars. They just had a lot more personality. I mean, take, for example, and I'm going to try and use this reference as much as I can in this video, but let's look at the ND MX-5 compared to the NA MX-5. Because safety regulations weren't a huge thing in the late 80s, you could have things like pop-up headlights, which in my opinion makes the Mark 1 MX-5 a lot more interesting to look at than the new one. I mean, I'm not going to lie, the new MX-5, the ND looks fantastic. I do think this is one of the best looking cars for the price and, in its kind of category. But the Mark 1 in my opinion, the NA completely clears the ND. And I might actually have some people disagreeing with me on this, but it's just a lot more classic looking and sleeker, and it just, the pop-up headlights, I mean, what would you want me to say? I don't think there's even an argument on the pop-up headlights. They just, look at them, they're great. I mean, it's the whole reason some people will buy this car is just for the headlights alone. So, you got to give it to the NA. But I mean, even the NB MX-5 is in my opinion, a very attractive looking car. I have an NB, so maybe I'm being a bit biased, but compared to the NC, I mean, the NC just doesn't quite look as good. It's a little bit chunkier and bigger, and even though the ND is actually lighter than the first generation and they managed to slim it down quite a lot compared to the NC, I still think the older cars, the older models look a lot better. I mean, just look at something like the 3 Series, the E46 and the E36, they're fantastic looking cars. I mean, don't even get me started on the E30, it's just such a good looking car. And to be fair, I do think even the E92 M3 was quite an attractive car. However, if you look at the F30 and the G20 3 Series, I don't think these look nowhere near as good as the older models. I mean, who knows, maybe in 20-30 years they will look as good, but I just don't see it. And like I mentioned before, this was due to a number of different reasons. Safety regulations meant that they could have a little bit more fun with the design. They didn't have to worry about different, crumple zones and all that kind of thing. It was a lot more simple. Basically, the designers had a lot more freedom, and it just made, I don't know, older cars, they just have so much more aura, so much more presence. You guys know what I mean. Maybe because there's less of them now as well, and seeing one is a little bit more rare, but I don't know, I think older cars just looked so much better. I mean, if you even want to go back further in time, if you go to the 60s, I mean, just look at a 67 fastback Mustang. You really can't beat that. In my opinion, it is one of the best looking cars of all time. Even like an Aston Martin DB5 compared to the Aston Martins of today. Don't get me wrong, I love a modern Vanquish, but man, even the older Vanquish, I mean, that's such a good looking car in my opinion. So I am going to give this first point to the older cars. So they're 1 point in front, they're doing well. Also, real quickly, 90% of you guys who are watching are not subscribed, so please feel free to subscribe. It's free and you can always unsubscribe at any time. Anyway, back to the video. Okay, so we know that older cars look better. So, okay, maybe modern cars fall short there, but let's talk about reliability. Now, in my opinion, this is actually quite a tricky debate because we don't actually know what modern cars are going to be like in 20 years time. However, what I will say is cars from the mid 80s to the early 2000s, they were built so well. I don't know what it was, especially German and Japanese cars from that time. I don't know what they were doing, especially car companies like Toyota and Honda. They were indestructible. Even brands that aren't necessarily known for their reliability, like some old Fords in the 90s, they were really well built. Compared to now, it almost feels like cars are similar to the new iPhones. I mean, I know I said it'll be interesting to see how they last in 20 years time, but with the whole finance and leasing culture, I don't know, I feel like cars are kind of made to break these days. I mean, good old Scotty Kilmer on YouTube, he's been a mechanic for a very long time, and he always points out how newer cars, use plastic internals now, whereas an older car will use metal or a lot stronger materials, with inside their engine. I mean, cars were built to last. There's no doubt about that. You know, my Mazda MX-5, my 2004, it's 20 years old. It's 20 years old, and it's I think it's on 85,000 miles, and the thing is pretty much bulletproof. I mean, I've not really had any major issues with it. The only thing that's gone wrong with my car so far has been the O2 sensor, which, I mean, that happens on most cars. It's something that you know you can't really avoid, but you know, other than that, the thing's been solid. I mean, I've got really no complaints at all. And you know, I do drive the car hard, and I do service and I do look after it. However, I can't complain. I really can't complain. Also, there is the fact that older cars are a lot easier to work on. Some new cars are pretty simple, but most of the time, I mean, you know, especially if you go back to cars from the 80s or 70s, they're very simple to work on compared to new cars. However, one thing that's really good about newer cars is the fact that parts are pretty easy to get. I mean, they're probably still making them. Whereas when it comes to a bit of an older car, sometimes, you know, you have to get a second-hand part, or, you know, you have to look for an aftermarket part where it's made by a completely different manufacturer, and it might not be as good as the OEM. I mean, I actually, you know, talk about my O2 sensor. I had it before with my O2 sensor where I replaced it with an aftermarket one, and it just wasn't as good. And then I had to find you know, an original O2 sensor, which was really difficult to get. And then if the manufacturer is still making that part, it's going to be very expensive. You know, it's crazy. Where I guarantee if it's a new car, you can go straight to the dealership and get a new part, which, trust me, it's so nice when you can do that and you don't have to spend hours on the internet trying to find a replacement. Oh, I also had the same issue with my cat, and then when I got an aftermarket cat, it wasn't as good and it didn't pass emissions, and I had to find an original one again. Trust me, finding parts for newer cars is easy. And I mean, considering that I drive an NBMX5, I don't think it's the most rare car, and it's not even that old. So I don't even want to know what it's like having a car from the 80s or you know, something where it really is difficult to get parts. You know, I have it easy, but yeah, it's a pain. However, I still am going to give this point to older cars because they are easier to work on, and there's loads of information on YouTube. There's probably a whole subreddit about your car. It's just easier. And let's face it, they were just built a lot better. Now let's look at practicality, just, you know, everyday use, what it's actually like to drive every day. And first thing is the fact that, you know, modern cars are probably a lot better to live with. I would say that they're definitely a lot safer than older cars. I mean, some modern cars even have sensors that if you get too close to the car in front, it will automatically brake. And of course, you have a lot more things like airbags and that kind of thing. I mean, even things like running costs, like, you know, to run a newer car, it's usually a lot easier because a lot of modern cars are hybrids. So, you know, they have better MPG, and then also, especially living in London and the UK, for some reason the government loves newer cars because of their emission standards, which I really hate because, I don't know, in my theory is that keeping an older car on the road is better for the environment than just constantly buying new cars. But of course, where's the financial gain for that? But your road tax and all that kind of thing is a lot cheaper for a newer car. And like I said before, just the NPG in general is usually a lot better in more modern cars. But the thing is, still, you can have an older car and it's great. I mean, I used to have an 03 Civic and it was such a good car. Like, it was an amazing car. The thing never broke down on me once, and it was actually quite a fun car to drive. Not just that, I actually genuinely think it was more practical than any of my other friends' cars at the time. It was when we was all first buying our first cars, and it had loads of space in it. And I actually wonder now, with all the safety regulations and everything, that cars are so big on the outside that maybe the insides feel a lot smaller. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like that car was just it was such a good car. I missed that car. I loved that 03 Civic, and it had really good MPG. I'm not gonna lie, like, it was really good on fuel. But unfortunately, things like the road tax and all that kind of stuff went up, and it made it a lot more expensive to run than a newer car. And yes, I know newer cars have things like Apple CarPlay, you know, a lot more of them come with heated seats that are standard and all other different nice little features. And I'm not gonna lie, it's nice, you know, even things like reverse cameras, they are nice. They make the usability of the car every day just easier. And I know that you can put Apple CarPlay into an older car, but you know, if we're just basing it, you know, with an old and new car, you know what I mean? Like, a newer car has a lot more features that just makes it easier to live with. You guys know what I mean. So I am going to give this point to newer cars because they are easier to live with. The fact of the matter is, they've been made in a time where, you know, the world has moved forward, and there are certain things that we expect and rely on now which before we didn't. I do think this I do think this argument is a lot closer than people think, but you know, because old cars are still easy to live with, but it really depends where you live and what kind of person you are. Because personally, I can live without the comforts. I don't need, you know, all of the comforts and tech that new cars have. I'm happy with my 2004 MX-5. Now, let's look at one of the main ones, and that is the fact that older cars are a lot more fun to drive. They're lighter, which lighter cars usually are more fun to drive. You know, and they're more analog feeling, they're a bit more raw. I've driven newer cars that are fast, okay, and they are very impressive. I drove a new Audi TT the other day, and it was so fast. I was completely blown away. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it was scary fast. You know, it was kind of scary to put your foot down, but I didn't really have that much fun driving it. It felt way too, I don't know, almost automated. It felt like I was driving a robot. It didn't feel like I was driving a car. And whilst it was, you know, a fantastic car, the thing was fantastic. It was, like I said, really fast. It stuck to the road. You know, you could throw it around corners. I much preferred driving my Mazda. And I know it's an old MX-5 and they're slow, but it just felt way more fun to drive. Okay, let's compare it with something a little bit faster then. Maybe not an MX-5, but even when one of my friends had an old V6 Audi TT, and that was super raw. That thing felt really exciting to be in. I didn't get to drive it, but it felt more fun than the newer one. I don't know how to explain it, but trust me guys, trust me on this. The thing is, I don't even have to explain it because you know exactly what I mean. Older cars are just way more fun to drive. I'm gonna use this as an example. I've used it quite a few times now, but the Mazda MX-5, if you take an NA and an ND, the new 2-litre NDs are really fast. They are actually, for an MX-5, I think they're like 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, which is quick for an MX-5. However, if you take the NA, the Mark 1, and if you drive both, I guarantee it, you'll have more fun in the first generation, even though it's slower. But I actually think the newer one is lighter, but trust me, there's just some charm and rawness and analog. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's just more fun. Even though I will say the MX-5, that, you know, the newer generations, they have actually kept the legacy going pretty well. Like, it's still a very fun car to drive, but I guess it's just that maybe it's just being nostalgic. I don't know what it is. Maybe it is just being nostalgic. But for example, say if I gave you an option, right? I said to you, right, you have a whole track day in a Ferrari F80, which is the new V6 hybrid Ferrari hypercar, right? And you had a whole day just driving that, you know, but you basically can just have as much fun in it as you want. But I also said, or you can drive a Ferrari F40. I guarantee, and I may be wrong, but most of you guys would rather choose the Ferrari F40 over the new F80. I could be wrong, but I highly doubt it. Or we could go from Ferrari to Lamborghini if I gave you guys a Murcielago or the new Aventador. Or I don't even know what the new Lamborghini is, the new flagship model. The Revoluto? I've just looked it up. I know I've seen this out on the road actually, but I guarantee a lot of you guys would rather drive the Murcielago with the big stick shift. I just know it. Even if I said something like a Civic Type R, I know you would rather pick the older versions. There will be someone out there typing in the comments furiously saying they'd rather try the new cars or whatever, but look, I know the majority. Maybe I need to do a vote in the comment section. But older cars are just way more fun to drive. They're way more engaging, they're way more analog, they're way more raw, they're way more fun. Don't get me wrong, a lot of new cars are super fast, they can handle really well, they're fuel efficient, they can just do everything. A lot of new cars now, especially the German ones, they're brilliant. You know, they're really, really good. They're almost too good, and they're heavy, and it's too much tech, and you don't even feel like you have control over it anymore. I would rather be driving around, you know, an E30 M3 and really pushing it than the brand new M3. I would rather, honestly, I'm being dead serious. You just feel the road more. There's just so much more driver to car connection. Where now it just feels like you're driving something that's just so good and just too computerized. And I don't know, it's too good. They've made it too good. So yes, I'm gonna give the fun argument to older cars. I'm not gonna lie here, older cars have completely wiped the floor in this argument. So I completely contradicted myself. There we go. There we go. I'm kind of glad to. But the fact is, new cars aren't as bad as everyone says they are. I know there's always going to be different arguments, but the majority of people on the internet at the moment are saying older cars clear new cars, which they do in the whole fun factor. But to live with and for the regular average person, a newer car is probably a little bit better. But for us car guys, yeah, I think older cars are a lot let's face it, they're a lot more fun. Well, that was definitely a chaotic video, but if you did manage to find some enjoyment, please remember to like and subscribe. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe at any time. And check out the other videos. I do videos like this all the time, so feel free to check them out. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.